Okay, well, good morning again. Buenos días, buen día. Ya pasamos a la sesión, bueno, que introduje antes. I already presented Ruth Rodríguez-Martínez. I repeat it again because now she's here. She's professor in our department, professor of journalism. She has a PhD in journalism from the Complutense University in Madrid. She had a lot of postdoc PhD researches in the USA, in Paris, also in Columbia University in New York. And well, today she's going to present, she's going to share with us this FACCTMedia Research Project. Before going on, I have to ask you permission to start the registration. Si estamos todos de acuerdo, vamos a registrar esta sesión. Sin ningún problema. Comencem, se está registrando. So we are recording the session. Okay, Ruth, welcome. Thank you for this presentation, for sharing your research with us. Well, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Well, good morning, and thanks for joining this session. As Carla was saying, my name is Ruth Rodríguez. I'm professor at the Communication Department, and I would like to thank the PhD program for this opportunity to discuss on disinformation, talk about how academics can defeat disinformation, and present the last research project from the Journalism Research Group. This project is called FACCTMedia, Media Accountability Instruments Against Disinformation, the impact of fact-checking platforms as media accountability tools and curricular proposal. I'm one of the principal investigators, and this is a project funded by the Spanish Ministry of Science. Before talking about the project, I would like to pay attention to some aspects and concepts that I consider important to discuss previously. First, as you have seen in the title of the project, it refers to the idea of disinformation. Just to make a distinction between the terms misinformation and disinformation, when we talk about misinformation, we refer to false information that is false, inaccurate, or misleading information that is communicated regardless the intention to deceive. And when we talk about disinformation, we refer to the information that is false or misleading information that is spread intentionally to deceive. This research project is focused on this second term, disinformation. If we think about the context and the factors that can explain the rise of disinformation today, we can identify, among others, some aspects and factors. For instance, the politicization of media, citizens' distrust towards institutions and media, and psychological bias and social rewards that drive individuals to share fake news. All those aspects are really interesting, but in the research project we are discussing now, we are going to be focused on that idea of the citizens' distrust towards institutions and media, and how can this trust restored. Okay, this is one of the main concerns of this research team. Well, when talking about disinformation, it is important mentioning the presence of the fact-checking platforms. If we pay attention to the role played by these platforms, we can see that fact-checking operations serve as critical interventions in the fight against the expansion of false and misleading news. And these entities scrutinize the claims of public representatives and alert citizens to online disinformation. According to Graves, in the process, these fact-checking platforms attempt to revitalize the truth-seeking tradition in journalism. For scholars specialized and interested in media ethics and media accountability, this is an important factor, since truth is one of the main and most important media ethic principles. So, according to Lucas Graves, one of the most important authors that have analyzed the fact-checking phenomena, we can distinguish between two different types of fact-checking platforms: those that follow the newsroom model and those that follow the NGO model. Let's pay attention to the newsroom model. This model is very present in the US and Western Europe, where national newspapers and broadcasters have created their own fact-checking platforms. Of course, those fact-checking platforms based in traditional newsrooms have a natural advantage in terms of reach and resources, but they are dependent on the editorial interest and financial support of their media parent. If we pay attention to some examples of this newsroom model, we can find, for instance, Fact Checker from the Washington Post that was created in 2007, Desintox from Libération, created in 2008, or Reality Check from The Guardian, created in 2011. If we pay attention to the other model, the NGO model, we can say that the most permanent fact-checking outlets operate outside of traditional newsroom, and they mostly follow the NGO model. So these organizations are in touch, in connection with news outlets, they employ some reporters, but they don't have the dedicated editorial resources or reliable audiences that the fact-checkers based in media companies have. On the contrary, independent fact-checking outlets are free of editorial and business constraints of established media firms. And, well, from the point of view of the economical situation, they have proved that they can be quite durable despite the difficult circumstances that they can face sometimes. Just to give some examples about these fact-checking platforms that follow the NGO model, we can mention PolitiFact.com, created in 2007, and from 2018 is operated by the Poynter Institute for Media Studies. The Argentinian Chequeado, created in 2010. We have also Fact Check in Chile, created in 2013. The Spanish fact-checking platform, Maldita, created in 2014. We also have the Brazilian Agencia Lupa, created in 2015. And we can also mention the Spanish Neutral, created in 2018. So if you are interested in identifying the different fact-checking platforms that they are operating right now in the world, you can visit the Duke Reporters Lab website. There you can see the database of active fact-checking sites and see how those platforms are present or not in different geographical areas. For instance, if you pay attention to the map, you can see that, for instance, the US, Latin America, and Western Europe is quite active in terms of fact-checking activities and fact-checking platforms. Just in case you are interested in getting more information about the fact-checking movement or phenomena, I recommend you to get familiar with these authors and works. For instance, Michel Amassin, that has been studying just the structural factors that affect the global emergence of fact-checking. Lucas Graves, that I consider that is one of the most prominent authors talking about fact-checking, the fact-checking phenomena. For instance, he has been published several analyses, reports, articles, just paying attention to the situation in different geographical areas, and also just the characteristics and the structure of those fact-checking platforms. We have also the example of this work from Dolores Palau-Sampio, that in 2018 she published an interesting analysis on Latin fact-checking platforms. And also we have a classic author, that is Jane Singer, that last year published this interesting article that is talking about how the fact-checking platforms are changing just the journalistic landscape and the journalistic practice. So another aspect that is important to understand when we talk about this research project that I'm presenting today is the idea of media accountability. If we want to understand that concept, we can refer to three main ideas that are just focused on the idea of information transparency, media self-regulation, and audience interaction and responsiveness. We can also pay attention to the distinction between traditional media accountability instruments and innovative media accountability instruments, since internet has dramatically changed the media accountability scenario. And we can still count on some traditional media accountability instruments that, of course, that possibility to interact with users and the internet and digital sphere has brought new and interesting innovative media accountability instruments that is important just to distinguish from the traditional ones. So if we refer or we pay attention to the idea of transparency, when we talk about transparency, we refer to practices that aim to shed light on the background to news production. And if we think about how can we apply transparency information in news outlets, we can just think about which is the information that media outlets provide about ownership structures of media companies, and also just the idea of make easily accessible the in-house ethical guidelines. So news organizations can also allow users to compare the news items published to the original sources of information by attaching external hyperlinks to the news stories, or they can use also the act of transparency, that is just tagging news items with the byline or the email address of the responsible author. In the same sense, they can also provide detailed profiles of journalists' specific expertise on the themes that they are reporting. When talking about media self-regulation, well, we consider that efficient media accountability practices and internal media self-regulation instruments can help media companies to be more responsible and ethical. One of the most important and prominent forms of journalistic self-regulation instruments is the journalistic codes of ethics that have been adopted in countries all over the world. So, for instance, the Journalistic Code of Ethics is one of the examples of these traditional media accountability instruments that I was referring before. But we have also other self-regulation instruments, such as Ombudsman, that is a traditional one, but also innovative instruments like, for instance, newsroom blogs to explain editorial decisions or comment on questions arising from the reporting. One important aspect when talking about these self-regulation instruments is just the necessity to regularly revise or monitor the quality of these systems, in the sense that it is necessary to revise their efficiency and also if they are updated enough to the new landscape, media landscape that is changing constantly. So it is important, yes, this aspect of revision of instruments. And when we talk about audience interaction and responsiveness, we refer to practices where media organizations encourage users to give feedback. Of course, the internet offers new opportunities and challenges for the responsiveness to audience criticism, such as media critical blogs, correction buttons, or interactive complaint systems. And we can say that, for instance, one of the areas which online newsrooms have taken more seriously this idea of audience interaction is the error management, since they are making error management more transparent. And for instance, another forms of production transparency and interaction with users can be introduced by allowing users to witness editorial meetings or submit their ideas for editorial decision making. So now let's come back to the project, okay? We have been discussing, I've been talking about the idea of disinformation, about the idea of fact-checking platforms, and the idea of media accountability. And it's just because if you remember the title of the project, it refers to the idea of media accountability instruments against disinformation, the impact of fact-checking platforms as media accountability tools, and curricular proposal. So back in 2019, when we sent the proposal to the Spanish Ministry of Science, we just formulate some hypotheses that we are still happy with them. And I would like to explain to you which are our hypotheses in this research project. So the first hypothesis brings the idea that the traditional and innovative accountability instruments detected so far have a moderate impact in fighting disinformation. The second hypothesis refers to the idea that fact-checking and verification platforms are new accountability instruments and they are effective against disinformation. The third one talks about that the international and Spanish fact-checking platforms share professional methodologies, objectives, and routines. The fourth one is the idea that fact-checking platforms facilitate an understanding of fake news by citizens and offer fundamental media literacy tools to improve critical thinking in societies. And the last hypothesis, the fifth one, refers to the idea that the study of the impact of disinformation and fact-checking platforms is not implemented enough in the Spanish communication faculties. So these are the hypotheses that we are just working on, and these are the goals, the main goals of the project. First, examine how accountability instruments evolve and adapt to deal with disinformation. The second goal is identify which accountability mechanisms have recently been created with the purpose of fighting disinformation. Analyze the innovative fact-checking methodologies, editorial criteria, and publication strategies carried out by media, academia, and independent fact-checking platforms at the Spanish and international level. And just the last main goal is just to formulate a methodological and curricular proposal that allows the introduction of fact-checking courses in journalism degrees. There are some key aspects when we talk about this project that are, first, the interdisciplinary team, the media accountability research background, the involvement and participation in international networks, and the business and industry involvement. So let's start with the idea of the interdisciplinary team, who we are. We are 17 journalism scholars specialized in media accountability, media ethics, journalism history, and media in democratic transition from 8 different universities: Universitat Pompeu Fabra, Universidad de Sevilla, Universidad Nebrija, Universidad de Mondragón, Universidad Carlos III de Madrid, Dortmund University, Universidad de Santiago de Compostela, and Universidad Complutense de Madrid. Here you have the list of participants, members of the team, on their affiliation. We are 10 women and 7 men. And well, we have been previously using this structure of having research members from different universities and geographical areas. And for us, it's very interesting and very useful because it brings already a comparative approach that for us is very positive. And it brings different points of view. So we have followed this structure of having people from different universities and geographical areas that we have been using previously. When I'm talking about the idea of our media accountability research background, is because we started our first research project on media accountability in 2007. And since then, we have led 3 national research projects, and we have participated in 1 European research project, Media, funded by the European Commission. So in these 15 years, we have had the chance to analyze the evolution of the media accountability scenario, how the media accountability instruments have evolved, changed, and also which new media accountability instruments have been created. And we have been also paying special attention to the opinion of journalists and citizens towards that media accountability landscape and scenario, and which were their perceptions about the instruments, necessities, and also the way the journalists were just interacting in terms of media accountability in their routines, in the daily routines. So this, regarding the methodological approach, in the previous research projects, we have been using a more quantitative approach. And in this case, in this present research project, we wanted just to go to the qualitative approach. And actually, we are using several methodologies, like I'm going to mention now, like for instance, expert panels and in-depth interviews with academics and professionals, in order just to create a state-of-the-art and identify particularities in different geographical contexts, referred to media accountability. We also want to use an ethnographic analysis. For instance, we want to visit and stay in several platforms from the US, Latin America, and Europe, in order just to help to create that methodological proposal. We want to also use ethnography through participant observation with users, dealing with fact-checking platforms, and also disinformation, how people react when dealing with disinformation and fact-checking platforms. And that will be very useful for the creation of media literacy actions. And also, we will use focus groups with journalism degree students that those focus groups will be very useful just to formulate our curricular proposal. That is one of the main goals of the research project. So we understand that this information affects today society and in the future, and it is important for us just to identify necessities and provide results with social return and impact. And in that sense, one of the aims is just creating media literacy tools to teach citizens how to identify and fight disinformation, and also formulate that curricular proposal to teach journalism students about how can they fight disinformation. So in terms of knowledge transfer, we are just working in different levels. In the education community level, we are interested in formulating that curricular proposal for journalism students. In the research community level, we are going to publish articles and conferences, papers and conferences about the results of the project. In the level of business, industry, and civil society, one of the aims is just to promote and organize media literacy seminars and workshops. And also, regarding to this business and industry and civil society level, we want to make and promote social media actions. I was telling you that we started our research on media accountability 15 years ago, and during these years we have had the chance to participate and get involved with different professional and academic networks. And well, here I would like to explain to you some of the networks where we are participating right now. And for instance, one of the networks is UFactCheck from the European Journalism Training Association that intends to build a curriculum unit on fact-checking within a European network of journalism schools. We are also members of the Media Act EHOMA network, that is a worldwide network of academics specialized in media accountability. This is a group that we belong to since we participated in the Media Act European Research Project. We are also members of the Ethics of Society and Ethics of Communication Working Group from the IMCR conference. We are also members of Euromedia Research Group, that is a network of European researchers that aim to describe and analyze developments in media structure and policy in the European region. And we are actually creating and building the well-being network, just taking the frame of the planetary well-being created by the Pompeu Fabra University. That is a network of European and Latin American researchers that the goal is to describe the media accountability context in the Latin America and the European region. We are also participating with some foundations and media outlets and fact-checking platforms. For instance, el Consell de la Informació de Catalunya, where we are members and we participate by providing reports, analysis, and we are also cooperating and working with the Spanish fact-checking platform, Maldita. Regarding the first results of this research project, we have been already published several articles. The first one, the authors are Victoria Moreno, Xavier Ramon, and Ruth Rodríguez, and it's an article that has been published in Media and Communication Journal, and it talks about just the similarities and differences between the fact-checking platforms in Latin America and Spain, okay, and also just how the projects have been created and the challenges and difficulties that they have faced since their creation. The second article, the authors are Xavier Ramon, Marcel Mauri, and Ruth Rodríguez, and it has been published in Hypertext, that is a journal from the department, the communication department, and it talks about how the social networks and fact-checking platforms have been fighting against disinformation on COVID. And the last article that I'm referring here is published. The authors are Marcel Mauri, Xavier Ramon, and Ruth Rodríguez, and it talks about, it's a proposal of ethical recommendations and self-regulation practices for journalists that they are covering and reporting on COVID crisis. Regarding conferences, we are going to participate in the Congreso Internacional de Ética de la Comunicación organized by the la Universidad Complutense de Madrid, and we are going to also participate in the Ethics of Society and Ethics of Communication Working Group from the International Conference IMCR. So, well, that's all. Here you can find my email, and also you have the email from Marcel Mauri and Xavier Ramon that are also members of this research group and research project. And well, here, if you have any question or any doubt, I'm glad to participate in the discussion. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ruth.
Okay.
Okay. We have a lot of time for questions, comments about this research. I must say that this is an ambitious project, but you have a lot of partners, a lot of people to answer all these questions, and it's really important. The object of the research is really important.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, you can ask questions in Spanish, in English, in Catalan. You can write it then. If you don't want to speak, you can write the questions on the chat, or you can open your microphone and speak. Any questions? I have a couple of them. I can start, but if you have a good question, we can start with that. Okay.
Come on, don't be shy.
I have one question, because when you introduce this classification, this taxonomy between these fact-checking platforms, they may be connected to the traditional media, let's say, or they can be autonomous NGOs, new organizations. In the case of the traditional media, because traditional media, they used to have the el defensor del lector or ombudsman. I don't know, in English it's ombudsman. But how is the relationship between this new fact-checking platform connected to media and this traditional profile who was the defensor of the reader, or ombudsman, I think it was.
Ombudsman, yes.
Okay, what's the relationship? Do they compete between them? How is that?
No, I mean, actually, I think the competencies are quite different. And it is important just to mention that the ombudsman figure that has been very important and has played a key role in media outlets is time by time less important and less present in media, in news media. Okay, that is the first aspect to take into account. But secondly, it is true that the ombudsman refers to petitions or demands that are they get directly from the audience. And in the case of the fact-checking activity of the news media, they sometimes answer questions from users, but they are not so dependent on the user's interaction always. So we can say that the ombudsman and the defensor del lector depends directly on the roles of the users. It's true that sometimes the ombudsman plays an active role just proposing some topics, despite the demand of the users and the audience. But in the case of the fact-checking activity, they can also propose topics that are not only dependent on the user's demands or user interaction. So it's quite different. It's quite different.
And how do these platforms, being them connected to media or not, how these fact-checking platform, how do they select what to check? Because they can't check everything. So
Yes.
I don't know if they look for, I don't know, information about, in this case, about the COVID or political issues or economics numbers. I don't know. How they do select that? It's complex.
Well, yes, it's very complex, but it's interesting because, for instance, one of the examples I was mentioning is just called PolitiFact. So it just talks by itself, that is very focused on the political fact-checking activity. So we can say that at the very beginning, the fact-checking platforms were actually quite connected to the political activity and the political discourse. For instance, if we pay attention to Chequeado from Argentina, that is a very important and is a referent for the fact-checking platforms in Spanish. They mainly were interested in checking the political discourse of Macri and other politicians. But it's true that from time to time, those fact-checking platforms have been diversifying the topics. And for instance, now, one of the most important topics to fight against disinformation is COVID. And for instance, now you have a lot of fact-checking activities and fact-checking actions focused on fighting disinformation on COVID. Why? Because it's a necessity. So sometimes the fact-checking platforms are proposing topics, but it is true that today the reality is so challenging that it is necessary to clarify and just to bring some light, because people are confused, and it is important to fight disinformation.
Okay, thank you. We have the first question in the chat. I don't know if you can read it. María José
Yes.
Palacios Esparza. ¿Cómo se mide la efectividad de las plataformas de fact-checking? How to measure the effectivity of these platforms?
Okay.
You can answer in Spanish or whatever you want.
Yes. This is a very interesting question. Why? Because it depends on several factors. For instance, you can just measure the methodology that the fact-checking platforms is following. And actually, one of the goals of this research project is just to analyze the different methodologies they are using and propose a methodology that can combine and enhance, improve the methodology that they are actually using. So you can refer directly to the methodology they are using, the fact-checking platforms, in order just to see if their process is accurate or not. It is true that, for instance, I was just referring to the Duke Lab reporter, that is an external site that is also supervising that they are active or not, and they are external institutions and organizations that they verify that the fact-checking platforms are efficient and they are doing their work correctly. Okay, that is from the point of view of academics, journalists, etc. But I'm going to talk about the point of view of the users. So depending on the users, they can say, oh, this fact-checking platforms is wrong. Why? Because they don't like the version that they are providing. They are saying, oh, they are saying that this is disinformation, and this is not disinformation because I believe in that. So there are a lot of journals that analyze the resistance of users to believe the actions provided by fact-checking platforms. Because when you believe something, you want to defend that. And it's such a great resistance that you have to believe that what they are saying that is wrong is true, that is actually one of the challenges, because it's quite difficult to put in question what the people are believing, because most of the times when you get this information, the disinformation content is through familiars, friends. So it is difficult to say to someone, the WhatsApp or the message that your mom sent to you is not true. Why? Because that disinformation arrives from channels that are connected not just to media outlets, but just affective or just close friends. And that determines the reaction, then the resistance of users to believe in what fact-checking platforms are saying. So there are different things to fight, or different things to analyze when considering the efficiency of fact-checking platforms.
Okay, thank you. I had prepared a question before, maybe it's connected to this. This one is more effectivity, but my question was, who watched The Watchmen?
Yes. No, that is true. And there are also analyses that they are doing, like who watch and verify, I mean, who check the fact checkers? Who is checking the fact checkers? And this is a very important aspect. Why? Because, for instance, there are some articles published that they refer that, for instance, Democrats in the US, they are more connected to the fact-checking platform activity than conservatives. So they're also, just referring to the previous idea that we were mentioning at the beginning, that most of the fact-checking platforms started connected to the verification of the political discourse. So it's very difficult to be neutral when analyzing political discourse, and also just analyzing or just selecting the quotes and the information you want to verify. So who is checking the fact checkers is also an important aspect. And I think in that point, academics play an important, a crucial role. Why? Because we have the external position that can give to us that distance that is necessary to verify and check the fact checker. So in that sense, I think academics can play a very important role.
I don't know if it's possible, or there already exists some kind of, I'm thinking in the graphic user interface, the user that's reading the news in a tablet or screen, in the mobile phone, whatever. And if there's any kind of device, graphic device, that can show you that this information has been checked or not. I don't know if they have developed, someone have developed something like that, like a thermometer. This is green. This information has been checked. This one is yellow. Well, pay attention. A red signal could be, no, this information is fake. I don't know if it is possible to do something like that, or you have heard something about this kind of devices.
So the thing is, imagine you are just talking about an article that you are reading, okay? The thing is that nobody's gonna say the information I'm providing is false or semi-false, okay? So what you are just proposing is something that has been published outside the media outlets, because the media outlets are always trying to say what we are saying is true, 100%. So for instance, in that sense, some media outlets such as El País or The Guardian, they are participating in something that is called the Trust Project, okay? That they, at the end of the articles, you can read, these articles has followed the Trust Project, okay? Why? Because that means that the information has been verified, has been checked, okay? But for instance, Publico, in that sense, that has also promoted and created some tools just to identify the index of truth or falseness of the information. But it's true that it is difficult to find right now what you are saying, because when you were just describing the thing, I already see what you wanted to say. And yes, the thing is, nobody's gonna say what I'm telling you is so false or so true, okay? I think we have a question from Emma. Yes.
Hello. Hi. It's not really a question, actually. Thank you for the lovely presentation. Just to answer the inquiry about having a graphical notification, I actually saw this on Facebook. I don't know if you've definitely noticed this. So I was just continuing the thread to say that during the last part of the American elections, once there was so much debate about, I forgot his name. I'm sorry. So about the presidency and all, and the elections. So there were so many rumors and stories about Trump, sorry. So this is why every time there was an article about Trump, there was a notification underneath saying that this has been, or this has undergone fact checking, and for more information, you can check the software there, and then it takes you to another link. So to answer the Dr. Scolari's question, that on Facebook, there is a graphical notification that says, yes, this article has gone a certain type of inquiry or fact checking.
Thank you, Emma, for this idea and observation. And in this sense, I would like just to remark the difference between media outlets and social networks. Okay, for instance, in our research project, we are just paying attention to social network actions and everything, but always being focused on the idea of what the media is doing, okay, to fight against disinformation, not just the social networks, for instance, such as Facebook or Twitter, okay, that they are also doing important actions against disinformation, okay, just to make a clear distinction between social media networks and media outlets. We are mainly focused on media outlets instead of social media networks.
Thank you. I have another question. Can artificial intelligence help us in this case? This crazy algorithm, maybe they can help us to filter, at least to classify the information?
Yes, I think so. But then in this, following the question of who is checking the fact checkers, the question now will be who is checking the the artificial intelligence that is providing that information. I think in this sense, if you interview members of fact-checking platforms, it is very interesting because they are proposing very interesting interdisciplinary teams, where most of them are using bots or artificial intelligence to provide the information against disinformation. I mean, the artificial intelligence is very present in the fact-checking platform activities, okay? And I think that is created, as I was saying, a very interesting scenario in terms of journalistic activities, since the activities are becoming more and more interdisciplinary. And we have been always like back to the technology or just being afraid of technology. And I think these fact-checking platforms are just accepting the necessity of cooperate and just participate. And artificial intelligence is key, is crucial in the fact-checking platforms. So if you talk to fact-checkers, some of them, perhaps the 30% of them, are people from IT, technology, programmers. I mean, it's very common because they need that technology in order just to revise huge amount of information every time.
I have shared a couple of links about Facebook and Google and their strategies for fact-checking. It's important because in the last week there was a information I tweeted also about, it's called the zero click, in the sense that many people is reading the news not in the web page of the journal, but they are reading them just in the first step that is a Google News. And exactly. Well, in that sense, they could put there some kind of thermometer or something like that, maybe, because many readers that don't arrive to the original source of information. It's another part of the discussion is that for the last 15 years or 20 years, Google, Facebook, they say we are not publishers. We're platforms, so we are not producing, we are not editing, we are not, and that's not true. And now it's very clear that they are publishers. They are, for example, Donald Trump was out of Twitter, so they are selecting. Now yes. They're fact-checking. So this change, or this is bad it's good maybe for us, but for this company it's bad for that discourse that we are not editing contents. They are editing contents, and now they are constrained to fact-checking.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think this is a very interesting point, and it's true that perhaps they are not just producing the content, but just controlling the media, the agenda setting. It's just a way to produce content. Because if we are just dealing with an incredible amount of information every day, if you just select what the readers are going to get access, it's just already a way to be an editor. So perhaps you are not a reporter in the traditional sense of the word, But since you are selecting and providing that information to the reader, you are just doing perhaps one of the most important actions and roles in the journalistic practice, that is just choosing what your reader is going to get to access. So this is also a journalistic practice.
Thank you. More questions? You can ask questions using the microphone, the chat. As you know, we have worked many years in transmedia literacy. How you're going to deal with this part of the project? That is, how you're going to introduce fact-checking, working with young people, I suppose, and media literacy. How is that part of the project? Because I'm very interested.
Don't ask me this question, because we were following just your methodology when we were just describing that that part of the memory.
Yeah, but we work with creating workshops to analyze what are teenagers doing with media, what kind of contents or activities they are developing with a new platform and smartphone and so on. We organize these creative or participatory workshops. So I think maybe it would be great to organize workshops with the young people and give them fake news and real news and ask them to check that, no?
This is actually what we want to do. Perhaps we would like to pay attention also to a broader sense of audience, in the sense that not just young people, but also other sectors of population, because we think that sometimes fact-checkers are doing an important role, but people are not so familiar with that actions. For instance, perhaps just because they follow them in social networks and they get some posts from Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, but it is true that we want to analyze how someone, a citizen, deals with a fact-checking platform. Because it's true that perhaps it can be a little bit technical, a little bit specialized, a little bit not so attractive, you know. So we really want to see how those users interact, because another part of the research is just to do focus group with journalism students, etc. But it's true that a journalist student is not so neutral, like if we compare to a user, a citizen that is not so connected to the journalistic activity, right? So we would like to see how someone can interact with, first, disinformation, then fact-checking platforms, because we can see that there is not a difficulty, but it's not so easy to get familiar with the methodology and with the structure.
Thank you. We have here a question from Priscilla. I was wondering what do you think regarding a law of communication regulations within your research field and how it may work?
Okay. So this is an interesting question. Why? Because when I was referring to media accountability, I was mentioning 3 aspects, and one of them was self-regulation. Okay. So, of course, there are a lot of new legislations and laws that are trying to regulate, for instance, disinformation, etc. And this is very interesting because it talks about the necessity, I mean, that the governments are really reacting and seeing the impact and the importance of controlling this information and the problems that come from those activities. But regardless the laws that are just trying to control disinformation, etc., we believe or we think that media should be independent from law, I mean the legal power, in order just to promote self-regulation practices. We think the media should be autonomous enough to control and to revise and to check their activity besides the legal aspect. Why I'm saying that? Because if you allow the legal aspect to control the media, perhaps in some countries where legislation is quite open, is not a problem, But if you allow legislation to control media, and we are talking about legal scenarios or legal contexts that are very close to the political power, that can be a problem. So law of communication and regulations are interesting, important, but we still believe that media should be regulated by itself, because that is part of their autonomy, and it gives them the possibility to play the four-role power and just to be autonomous and just to be independent from the legal and the political power. And that is a key aspect in a democratic society, in order just to provide and to guarantee a democratic scenario.
Thank you. 15 years ago, we were talking about the Web 2.0, the collaborative web. I was thinking, is it possible to organize the fact-checking as a collaborative activity, or it's only for professionals and maybe artificial intelligence? Can we socialize the fact-checking, or will it be worst?
Yes, sometimes the experiments. No, I think, for instance, if you talk to fact-checkers from different countries, you can see that is a kind of brotherhood. I mean, they are in touch, they collaborate a lot, because I think they share that goal and aim, and they you know, there is a real common ground, and there are a lot of conferences where they put things in common and everything. This connected to the idea of professionals doing fact-checking. What about society? Okay, how can we involve society? And it's true that this is something that we have detected, that fact-checking platforms are taking more and more into account the user's interaction, in terms of how users demand or they ask to verify specific questions. Okay, so the problem, what I see about what you are saying, is that sometimes fact-checking actions are quite specific to a political context, to a social context, okay? So it is difficult to find like universal fact-checking questions from society, because sometimes those fact-checking questions are very specific about what a politician said, or just a specific figure about the number of deaths in this country for COVID, you know what I mean? So those I don't see so clear those universal fact-checking questions from society yet. Okay, because usually the fact-checking questions are really specific to a context.
Yeah, this is connected also with the transparency of governments, the data transparency. So if data is transparent, it's difficult to say other things, because it's very easy to check that. It's connected.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Más preguntas?
Yes.
More questions?
Come on.
I would think it would be great to have something like a very easy to use interface, something like Shazam, where
yes.
a politician speaking and you activate the Shazam.
It's not true.
Obviously, that would be great. Okay, well, maybe one day with artificial intelligence and some kind of algorithm, we can detect this in real time. We have a question from Felipe Moreno Salazar. Considerando los monopolios en el sector de la información, ¿no es un poco idealista pedir autorregulación mediática? ¿Existen experiencias de trabajo con asociaciones de usuarios para construir políticas públicas sobre el tema? Here, the question of Felipe is about, is it possible to think in self-regulation of media companies? I don't know. If there are any experience of with association of users associations to create these public policies of about this. I don't know, Ruth.
Yeah.
Is it possible?
Yes.
Can we self-regulation to media or to any to any institution? Imagine, for example, in universities, we have a lot of regulation, and
yes.
I don't know why we have to be regulated and media no.
Yes, exactly. Thanks, Felipe, for this interesting question. Actually, I think, yes, it's idealistic, but we have to be idealistic. At least we are scholars, and we need to deal with ideals, not just with reality. But just trying to answer your question, well, I think it's idealistic, ask for self-regulation, but it's true that it is something that, for instance, media, I think, is just being forced to do, in the sense that users are playing right now a very active role, and media outlets, they know that they are scrutinized every day by users, by readers, by the audience. So sometimes, if you want to be competitive, if you want to be the one that is trusted by users, you need to self-regulate, and also just to promote and just to preserve that independency and that transparency, etc. So I think it's very interesting that, for instance, right now, a lot of people, for instance, perhaps just because of pandemic, the COVID crisis, a lot of people are just accepting that they have to pay just to get information. Okay, so if you are choosing a newspaper or a media outlet and you accept paying as you pay Netflix or other platforms, you're going to see if you can trust that information. So I think the model, the economic model that is just being more and more common today for media outlets, is just forcing media to improve and just to guarantee to the reader and the user that they are just accomplishing that idea of independency and transparency, and just allowing users to participate in users' interaction, etc. So I think it's a matter of surviving. If you want to survive, you have to give quality to your users. Otherwise, your users are going to pay and leave your platform. So I think in that sense, it sounds perhaps very liberal, but I think it's just working.
I found this article is 6 years old about this issue, media self-regulation, from the European Journal of Communication. In this context, the official strategy of the European Union is self-regulation in the official position?
Well, it is difficult to find official, because, for instance, we are just talking about different concepts. When we are talking about disinformation, you just don't just pay attention to media outlets. You just also pay attention to social networks. Okay, so if we think about which is the position of European Union towards self-regulation, European Union is just actually very supporting the idea of self-regulation. Okay, but there are a lot of aspects, for instance, disinformation, that they are just not only focused on media outlets, because a lot of disinformation comes from social networks. So it sounds contradictory, like, okay, if they are supporting self-regulation, how come they are proposing laws or legislation against disinformation? Okay, it's because some aspects, like, for instance, disinformation is also connected to not just media outlets, but also social networks. Okay, but it's true that in the European context, that idea of self-regulation is quite important. For instance, we just have in mind, at least, for instance, Carlos and me, we have the Catalan or the Spanish context, media context. But in other contexts, like, for instance, Sweden, Germany, Denmark, that idea of self-regulation is much more important than in the Catalan or the Spanish context, okay? Because the power and the independency of the media is much more strong, is stronger, for instance, from the political power or institution that, for instance, in the Catalan or the Spanish context, okay? So if you think about those countries that are also part of the European Union, there, the self-regulation is quite strong.
Okay, we have one more question by Maria Jose Palacios. How do platforms disseminate the results of the fact-checking, considering that traditional media have to be another platform more powerful than social media? It is connected to the question by Felipe Moreno.
Yes, for instance, I've been surprised because I've seen some, I don't have to say this, like carteles from Maldita talking about COVID in Barcelona. I mean, you know, it's not just television, it's not just social media, Instagram, Twitter. I've seen this in the city. Like, I was in the bus and I was reading how Maldita was just explaining how to use properly the mask, or just how to fight the virus when you arrive home. So yes, I mean, they are trying. Why? Because they have detected that people need that information. And for instance, when talking about health issues, it is important and people demand that. So I think in that case, they are just trying to do actions beyond the screen, beyond the TV platform, okay? They are also going to the street. Why? Because that is information that is really important, and people are really concerned about that because it's a health issue, okay? So yes, the actions are really, really diverse. And for instance, they propose a lot of seminars, workshops. They collaborate with universities in order just to get more connected to society. Yes.
Okay. Any more questions? Fact-checking?
Disinformation and media accountability. You're very welcome.
You don't talk about fake news, practically. You don't use that concept.
Not really. And I was actually doing that distinction between misinformation and disinformation, because I think it's important just to distinguish. And that idea of, well, disinformation is something that is intentionally. And I think that intention changed everything. And this is actually one of the, of course, we have a lot of problems. We have fake news problems, we have misinformation problems, we have disinformation problems, but we were just focused on that idea of disinformation in terms that how, or from where that intentionally false information comes from, and how that false information has an impact on society and users. So yes, we were just thinking about that concept, disinformation.
Okay. Any more questions? Preguntas?
Come on, guys.
Because we have a coffee break, more or less now, and then we, at 11:30 Barcelona time, we are going to continue with the experiencias de movilidad. I don't know. Any more questions?
So in any case, if you have questions related to the area of disinformation, media accountability, and fact-checking platforms, you have already our emails. I'm Ruth Rodríguez, but Marcel Mauri and Xavi Ramon are also members of the research group, research project, and they are also happy to help you. Okay, so don't feel, feel free to ask us any question related to that topic. In case if you are, we have also the website from the project where you can see some resources. Okay, you know, if I was just providing some articles and authors in case you are interested in the fact-checking phenomena. Okay, but if you have more interest or more questions related to that, fact-checking platforms, disinformation, or media accountability, please, we are here to help you. Okay.
Okay. When will this project finish?
2024. But that is another aspect that I didn't mention during the presentation, that what happened when you have a project and COVID comes. So, you know, all the things, I mean, the schedule is a little bit different, you know, because if you want to do some, for instance, focus group or something like that, it changes a little bit the situation. But well, we guess that we will get 1 more year, because you know that sometimes you can ask for a prórroga with the Spanish ministry, and considering the situation, I think it will be like necessary just for some methodologies.
We invite you and the rest of the team to share the final results of this research.
Great.
Thank you very much, Ruth. And well, we continue in 25 minutes. I share with you, this is the next activity, and I'm going to share with you in the chat, this is the link to the next Collaborate. So at 11:30 Barcelona time, that is in 25 minutes, we are going to meet again in Collaborate to continue with the experiencias de movilidad. Moltes gracias. Thank you very much.